Picture a crowd gathering in the dusty town square, not for celebration, but for spectacle. Thousands of spectators, including children, arrive with picnic baskets to witness a man's final moments on the gallows. This wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the common face of justice across the American frontier. From the mid-1800s through the early 1900s, punishment in the Wild West was swift, public, and brutally effective. Where formal law struggled to take root in sprawling territories, communities developed their own methods of maintaining order, methods that would shock modern sensibilities. These weren't just punishments, they were warnings etched in flesh and displayed for all to witness. The frontier demanded harsh measures, and those who broke its rules paid prices that left permanent marks on both body and memory. Frontier courts and swift sentencing. Long before courthouses dotted the western landscape, justice moved on wagon wheels. Wagon train companies elected councils empowered to carry out their own justice systems, complete with judges, juries, and executioners drawn from their own ranks. These traveling tribunals handled everything from petty disputes to capital crimes, often reaching verdicts within hours of an offense. For minor crimes, councils generally ordered mediation, while more violent crimes might include public whipping. When murder occurred on the trail, emigrants selected jurors who stood in semicircles around the accused as fellow pioneers looked on, replicating the legal venues they remembered from back east. The speed of frontier justice was legendary. In 1859, John Stoffel was convicted and hanged within 48 hours of murdering his brother-in-law for gold dust in Denver, a settlement of merely 150 buildings that still managed to draw 1,000 spectators to witness the execution. Territorial judges earned reputations based on their severity. Isaac C. Parker, perhaps the best-known hanging judge, sentenced 160 men to death by hanging during his 21 years at Fort Smith, Arkansas, though only 79 were actually executed. These makeshift courts operated on practical necessity rather than legal precedent, establishing order through visible and immediate consequences. Branding with hot irons. The searing hiss of hot iron against flesh served a dual purpose on the frontier, identifying criminals and deterring crime through permanent disfigurement. Borrowed from the practice of marking livestock, human branding left offenders visibly marked for life, their crimes literally written on their bodies. In 1790 at Jonesboro, Tennessee, John Wilson and Joseph Folsom, convicted of horse stealing, received their punishment on the pillory, where they endured 39 lashes before their right cheeks were branded with the letter H and their left cheeks with the letter T. The letters served as permanent advertisements of their crimes, ensuring that no community they entered would remain ignorant of their past. Horse theft, a particularly serious offence in a society dependent on these animals for survival, regularly earned branding alongside other severe punishments. The practice extended beyond simple identification. In 1640, a Virginia court sentenced a runaway slave to be branded in the cheek with the letter R, while thieves might receive a T branded on their forehead or hand. Some frontier settlements applied the punishment for repeat offenders of lesser crimes, creating a visible record that followed criminals wherever they traveled. The psychological impact proved as powerful as the physical pain, as branded individuals found themselves rejected by communities and denied opportunities to rebuild their lives, the mark serving as both punishment and prophecy of continued ostracism. Public whippings for frontier crimes. The crack of a whip echoed through frontier settlements as one of the most common forms of corporal punishment. When English settlers arrived in the New World, they brought not only their religious and social customs, but their varied forms of criminal punishment as well, and flogging proved adaptable to frontier conditions. Whipping posts stood prominently in town squares, often located near courthouses or on the common, serving as constant reminders of the consequences of law-breaking. The instruments varied from simple leather whips to the notorious cat-o'-nine tails, a multi-thonged weapon that could leave backs rough with welts and covered in blood. In 1846, a Raleigh Register reader was repulsed after witnessing the humiliating flogging of two men, where the 39 lashes they received left each man's skin rough with welts and covered with blood. The number 39 held particular significance, being one less than the biblical 40 stripes, a measure meant to prevent accidental death while still delivering severe punishment. Frontier communities employed flogging for a range of offences, from public drunkenness and brawling to theft and assault. On wagon trains moving westward, more violent crimes might include public whipping as punishment, with the accused stripped and beaten before their travelling companions. The public nature of the punishment served multiple purposes. It humiliated the offender, satisfied community demands for justice, and provided a visceral warning to potential lawbreakers. Unlike branding or mutilation, whipping scars could sometimes be hidden, offering offenders a chance at redemption if they relocated, though the memory of public humiliation often proved as lasting as any physical mark. Legal hangings under territorial law. The scaffold stood as the ultimate symbol of frontier justice, where formal law met public spectacle. During the Wild West days, hangings were public events that everyone attended, drawing thousands of people, and spectators rarely missed the executions and even brought their children. These were carefully orchestrated affairs, despite their grim purpose. An invoice from the Santa Fe County District Court in New Mexico from 1849 showed the cost of a hanging exceeded $110, equivalent to more than $4,500 today, with territorial governments absorbing costs for lumber, labor, coffins, rope, and other materials. Professional executioners took pride in their work. George Maledon, known as the Prince of Hangmen, liked to have a rope that was 1.5 inches thick, soaked and air-dried before being tallowed or soaped to soften it, and over 2 decades he oversaw at least 60 executions. The process became increasingly refined, with formulas developing for clean hangings that placed the noose knot on the left side of the prisoner's neck to render them unconscious quickly. Condemned prisoners were allowed final words, which varied dramatically. In 1850, one of the 5 Cayuse Native Americans hanged in the Oregon Territory asked whether missionaries had not taught them that Christ perished to save his people. Doctors attended to confirm death, though their presence wasn't always necessary, as in the case of Black Jack Ketchum in 1901, whose head separated from his body during a bungled hanging. These legal executions, however theatrical, represented attempts to establish formal justice systems in territories transitioning from lawless frontier to organized society. Ear and nose cropping for serious crimes. Among the most visibly disfiguring punishments inherited from colonial practices, ear and nose cropping served to permanently mark serious offenders. In various jurisdictions of the 13 colonies, even relatively minor crimes such as hog stealing were punishable by having one's ears nailed to the pillory and slit loose or even cropped. This brutal tradition continued into frontier settlements, where permanent disfigurement served both punitive and preventive purposes. The procedure varied in severity. In 1755, in Charles County, Maryland, a young African-American female was subjected to the pillory for perjury and was not only flogged but had her ears cropped close. Some offenders had their ears nailed to the pillory board, forced to stand motionless for hours before the ears were severed to release them. The punishment carried forward from earlier periods when, in the Southwest Territory that would become Tennessee, frontier law under the 1780 Cumberland Compact saw Judge John McNary sentence Nashville's first horse thief in 1793 to be fastened to a wooden stock for 1 hour, given 39 lashes, have his ears severed and cheeks branded. Nose cropping, though less common, appeared in some jurisdictions for particularly heinous offences. These mutilations ensured that criminals could never escape their past, as their disfigurement announced their crimes to every person they encountered, effectively creating a permanent social exile even after their sentence was complete. These punishments reveal a frontier society struggling to establish order in vast territories where traditional law enforcement barely existed. What modern eyes see as excessive cruelty, frontier communities viewed as necessary deterrents. The public nature of these penalties served practical purposes in scattered settlements where news traveled slowly and authority remained tenuous. Each branded cheek, each cropped ear, each body swinging from the gallows carried a message that required no written law to understand. As territories matured into states and formal justice systems took root, these brutal practices gradually